Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Jung believed that what shapes your life is not only what you know about yourself, but also everything you don't. And in that mysterious space between the known and the unknown, there lies a map. A psychological map of four inner directions. Four ways the spirit moves, which Jung called the psychological functions. Thinking, the analytical mind seeking truth through logic and clarity. Feeling, the heart-based compass choosing through value, connection, and harmony. Sensation, the anchor to the present experiencing life through the five senses. Intuition, the dreamer's eye perceiving symbols, potentials, and the unseen. Each of us carries all four, but one of them early on becomes your inner compass. And if you don't know which one is steering, you're driving through life with your eyes closed. When you see someone sitting quietly in the corner of a cafe, eyes following the quiet flow of time, you might think that person must be an introvert. And if you see someone lighting up a room with laughter and magnetic energy, you might assume they must be an extrovert. But the truth is far deeper than appearances. Carl Jung did not define introversion and extraversion as surface-level traits. He saw them as archetypal orientations of the psyche, the way your psychological energy moves. An introvert doesn't simply talk less. They draw energy from the inner world, from reflection, emotion, memory, and imagination. An extrovert isn't just loud. They come alive through interaction, through action, engagement, and outer stimulation. Jung said each person possesses both principles, introversion and extraversion, but one will dominate. And that balance or imbalance shapes how you love, how you work, and how you respond to the world around you. Introversion, the secret life within. Introverts live in a universe you cannot see with your eyes. They're often called dreamers, but really they are the ones who touch the roots of emotion. They keep journals in their minds. They gather fragments of memory and assemble them into quiet inner landscapes. They don't avoid the world, they simply need silence to hear their own voice. But in a society that celebrates performance and presence, introverts may feel like they're not enough. How many of us were told to speak more, smile more, come out of our shell, when all we wanted was time alone to process life? Introversion is not a lack, it is a depth. Extraversion, the waves that move the world. Extroverts live by the pulse of life. Each conversation is a spark. Every action a way to feel real. They connect easily. They inspire not just themselves, but everyone around them. They think while speaking. They learn by doing. They thrive in the rhythm of life's unfolding adventure. But even extroverts grow weary. In silence, they may feel lost. When forced to turn inward, they may not recognize themselves without someone else's reflection. Extroversion is not superficial, it is expansive. The invisible map, inner misalignment. Jung emphasized no one is purely introverted or extroverted. We are all a blend, but one orientation usually dominates. When someone lives too long against their natural type, they begin to fracture inside. An introvert forced to always be on may grow disconnected from their inner truth. An extrovert trapped in quiet routine may wither like a plant without sunlight. Knowing your dominant energy isn't about labeling, it's about making space for your soul to breathe. The overlooked wound, we were taught to conform. From childhood, most of us were molded to fit a certain template. Social, honor, good. Quiet, honor, bad. Or the opposite depending on culture and context. But this teaching comes with a cost. We deny our natural orientation. We live half lives present, but not fully alive. An introvert forced to be the life of the party may lose their spiritual depth. An extrovert told to tone it down may suffocate their creative fire. So the real question isn't, am I an introvert or an extrovert? But rather, have I been living in alignment with my natural source of energy? Suggestions for inner growth. For introverts, allow yourself to experiment in social environments, but schedule quiet time to recharge. Don't negotiate your solitude. For extroverts, practice being with yourself. Notice your thoughts in the absence of feedback. You may be surprised by the depth waiting there. Jung didn't want you to simply know who you are. He wanted you to become who you are in truth, in freedom, in wholeness. And that journey begins with a simple question: where do I draw my energy from? In Jungian psychology, we don't just see the world with our eyes, we see it through the invisible structure of the psyche, where four streams of energy flow in parallel: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. These are not merely personality traits. They are the core operating systems of the soul. Two people may witness the same moment, but their experience will differ profoundly depending on which function leads. Through sensation, they see a tree. Through intuition, they see a symbol of rebirth. Through feeling, they sense a childhood memory. Through thinking, they analyze its biological structure. So the question is, which function is your inner compass? 1. Thinking, the power of abstract mind. Those who lead with thinking are like engineers of the inner world. They seek logic, structure, and order, not because they lack emotion, but because they believe truth has an inner consistency independent of moods. They solve problems with clarity, analysis, and systems, but when forced to feel their way through chaos, they may feel lost in a fog. Their challenge isn't a lack of intelligence, it's the distance from the emotional world of others. They must learn not everything true must be said, and not everything logical brings healing. 2. Feeling, the realm of values and connection. Feeling types don't choose based on logic, but on what feels right, what aligns with their inner values and relationships. This isn't mere sentimentality. Feeling is a moral compass. It asks, is this authentic? Is this meaningful? Is this kind? But in a world that often idolizes rationality, feeling types are labeled too emotional, irrational, too sensitive. They often retreat or pretend to be someone else to avoid being hurt. Their maturity begins when they realize feeling is not weakness. It's the radar of the soul. Logic may shift with context, but truthfulness echoes forever. 3. Sensation, the gravity of the present moment. Sensation types live in direct contact with experience. For them, reality is enough. They don't need metaphors. They don't chase what might be. They experience life through sight, sound, taste, texture. They touch life. They do life. They react to life. They are the chefs, the surgeons, the athletes, the ones with feet on the ground while the world floats away. Their challenge, they may be trapped in the eternal now, blind to deeper meaning or future potential. They might dismiss dreamers as unrealistic. But if they learn to use intuition as a compass, their groundedness becomes awakened action. 4. Intuition, the instinct for what could be. Intuitive types live as if tuning into signals from the future. They sense patterns in chaos. They connect invisible dots. They imagine what's never been done. They are the dreamers, poets, inventors, visionaries. They see a gesture and hear an untold story behind it. Their challenge, they can become overwhelmed by ideas, jumping from one to the next without finishing. They might get lost in the future and forget to inhabit the now. But when intuition is grounded in sensation, they don't just see possibilities, they bring them into being. In many teachings, it's left unsaid, we all have all 4 functions. They differ only in order and strength. Neglecting a function doesn't mean it's gone. It means it waits in the shadows, ready to be seen and integrated. That integration of strength and shadow is what Jung called the process of individuation. It's not about becoming someone else, it's about becoming whole. If the 4 functions of the psyche are the primary colors of the soul, then Jung's 8 psychological types are the living canvas, the ever-shifting painting each of us unconsciously creates through every choice, every reaction, and every dream yet to be deciphered. Carl Jung believed that each person is guided by a dominant function, and that function expresses itself in either an introverted or extroverted direction. This creates 8 psychological types, 8 distinct ways of thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting the world. 1. Extroverted thinking, T, the system builder of the world. These are the engineers of reality. They build structures where everything must work. Decisions are logical, actions are justified. Efficiency is sacred. They pave psychological highways, the fewer obstacles, the better. But in their drive for order, they may forget humans are not machines. They are feelings, contradictions, and chaos. True mastery begins when they pause, not for optimization, but for a tear. Sometimes a single moment of empathy can save an entire soul. 2. Introverted thinking, T, the inner philosopher, where the engineers, the outer world tie dissects the inner one. They're not interested in borrowed truths. They crave the raw logic beneath all appearances. They dwell in abstract laws, often appearing distant or cold, but only because they're chasing purity of thought, even they haven't fully named. When they learn to share their process simply, they become guides for those seeking deeper meaning. 3. Extroverted feeling, Phi, the heartbeat of the collective. They read a room like a symphony, sensing who's hurting, who's lonely, who's on the edge. Faye lives for harmony and empathy. They often become the emotional caretakers, but this can lead to self-erasure. When they finally ask, what do I feel, instead of, what does everyone need, they become not just warm but radiant. 4. Introverted feeling, Phi, keeper of the sacred flame. Unlike Phi doesn't need validation to feel real. Their moral compass is internal, intense, and unwavering. They may be quiet, but they know what's true for them. They are artists, poets, spiritual seekers. Yet when misunderstood, they may retreat into silence, feeling alien in a world obsessed with approval. Healing begins when they trust I deserve to be here, even if no one else understands. 5. Extroverted sensations, the moment dweller. C doesn't predict. It experiences, it touches, tastes, sees, and lives. Reality is enough. Now is everything. They learn by doing. They are warriors, dancers, craftsmen, but they can fall into pleasure chasing or mistake stimulation for fulfillment. When they connect with intuition, they no longer just react to life, they shape it. 6. Introverted sensation. C. Guardian of the living archive. C is a living library of memory. They recall the smallest details, the smell of mother's flowers, the light on the first day of school. They find security in what's known, tested, and true, but they may fear change, clinging to the past. When they learn to honor tradition while embracing renewal, they become keepers of soul time. 7. Extroverted intuition, the idea hunter. Ni is a storm of insight. They see connections where others see randomness. They are creators, entrepreneurs, visionaries. But energy too abundant can scatter. They jump from one spark to the next, often leaving trails unfinished. Their genius is unlocked when they choose depth over breadth, transforming potential into presence. 8. Introverted intuition. Ni, listener of the future's whisper. Ni is not loud. It is the dream that lingers for years. It is knowing without knowing how. They glimpse the future through layered patterns they don't consciously chart. But because they struggle to explain their insight, they are often doubted or isolated. When they learn to translate their inner vision, they become the seers of a new era. Human beings are not merely a personality type. In Jungian psychology, the psyche is more like a symphony and orchestra of 4 instruments, the dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and inferior functions. Each one plays a distinct melody, but only when they harmonize can you truly hear the music of your soul. 1. Dominant function, the soul's commander. This is your psychological identity, the way you naturally respond, how you make decisions without hesitation, and where your strength effortlessly flows. If you lead with extroverted feeling fee, you sense others' emotions before even knowing your own. If your core is introverted intuition-y, you just know the right path without needing it explained. But beware, when this function dominates unchecked, it casts a shadow. Everything outside your familiar self-image is pushed into the dark. 2. Auxiliary function, the balancing ally. If the dominant is your main identity, the auxiliary is the inner companion who keeps you from tipping into extremism. For example, an extroverted thinker T, without the tempering of introverted feeling phi, may become cold, controlling, and disconnected. But with phi, they learn empathy to lead, not dominate. Jung saw the development of the auxiliary as a mark of maturity. It's not about surrendering your ego, but expanding its boundaries. 3. Tertiary function, the child within. The tertiary is like the inner child, not strong enough to lead, yet too present to disappear. It often emerges during life transitions, creative bursts, or moments of existential shift. A person with Nife might have C extroverted sensing as tertiary, often ignoring sensory pleasures, until one day they fall in love with painting, dancing, traveling, and suddenly they feel alive. When neglected, this function can act out impulsive, clumsy, misunderstood. But when acknowledged, it becomes a gateway to flexibility and play. 4. Inferior function, the door to the shadow. No one likes to face their weaknesses. Yet Jung believed the inferior function is the gatekeeper to your shadow, the parts of you you've exiled because they don't fit your ideal self. If you're phi dominant, your inferior may be T. You might hate bureaucracy, logic, or rules, but under stress you become exactly that rigid, controlling cold. When underdeveloped, this function fuels self-sabotage, emotional meltdowns, hidden anxiety, a sense of being hijacked by something unknown. But seen with awareness, it becomes your greatest teacher. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you begging to be seen. Application to know yourself is to heal yourself. Most adults operate almost entirely from their dominant function, the rest left in the shadows. They say I'm just a logical person, or I'm not creative, or I'm bad at emotions. But that's not the truth. That's what happens when we stop exploring ourselves. Jung called the process of wholeness, individuation, not becoming someone else, but becoming your whole self. Not a copy of family or society, but the only version of you that has ever existed. In summary, dominant is you when you're not thinking. Auxiliary is you at your most balanced. Tertiary is you when you're curious or playful. Inferior is you when you're in crisis, but also when you're awakening. So the question remains, will you keep wearing the mask or finally meet the part of you that never got permission to live? So far, we've explored the 4 functions, the 8 personality types, and how the layers of function interact within you. But the deepest truth waits in the dark. It is the inferior function, the gateway to your shadow. Not the enemy, but the threshold to your truest self. 1. The inferior, the child in the dark. The inferior function rarely speaks in the light of consciousness. It hides like a silent tremor, waiting to surface in moments of deep stress, depression, or crisis. Suddenly your reactions shift. You yell when you usually stay composed, withdraw when you're known to lead. You feel irrational, lost. But those are not accidents. They are your lowest function knocking at the door. For example, a strong extroverted thinker, T avoids feelings. Until one day, wounded and raw, they cry out, "I don't care, I'm fine on my own." This isn't fake, it's their suppressed introverted feeling. Phi erupting in a misunderstood scream. 2. The shadow, the inner werewolf. The shadow is everything you've denied, repressed, or feared to become. Your anger, your envy, your grandiosity, your selfishness, and fragments of your inferior function. Jung wrote, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To face the shadow is to stare into the mirror and not flinch. It's in breakdowns, betrayals, existential dread, where your old mask shatters and a new truth begs to be born. 3. Individuation, the return to wholeness. Individuation is not about fixing yourself. It's about becoming whole. Recognize the inferior function. Accept it as part of your inner design. Harmonize the dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and inferior. Make peace with your shadow, not as ruler, but as teacher. This is the path from fragmentation to integration, from persona to presence, from surviving to becoming. 4. Emotional clues that you're integrating. Individuation doesn't arrive in one epiphany. It moves in whispers, a silent tear of recognition, a sudden stillness that feels sacred, a knowing, I am not just my logic, not just my feelings, I am all of it. You realize you can be strong and vulnerable. You can dream and stay grounded. You can love without losing yourself. That is inner freedom. 5. Day 5. Living it out, individuation in daily life. This is not philosophy. This is action. When you acknowledge your inferior function, you gain courage to walk into the unknown. When you embrace your shadow, you stop being shattered by criticism. When all 4 functions flow together, you stop living one-dimensional and become whole, adaptive, alive. Stress is no longer just a breakdown, it becomes a breakthrough. 6. Expand your journey to go even deeper. Consider exploring. Shadow and dreams, learn how it appears in symbols and how decoding them heals the psyche. Active imagination, a Jungian method to converse with the shadow through drawing, writing, or visioning. Childhood wounds. How unmet childhood needs create the list of traits you've exiled. Shadow versus MBTI. The shadow is not just your opposite type, it's your unlived truth, not your typing error. Real-life individuation stories like the CEO who broke down in therapy and found his buried heart, or the artist who rediscovered her soul through grief. Up until now, you've walked with me through the corridors of the psyche, where the 4 functions, 8 personality patterns, and layered dynamics of the mind unfold. You've glimpsed the shadow not as an enemy, but as a forgotten room of your soul. This journey is not just information. It is a sacred invitation to come home to yourself, one fragment at a time. From talent to true freedom, we once believed, if I'm good at one thing, that's enough. But Jung invites us to go beyond labels. You are not just a thinker, feeler, sensor, or intuitive. You are the weaving of all 4, a soul composed of many melodies. And the miracle, it often hides in what you once labeled as your weakness. The inferior function, the shadow. If you treat the darkness as an enemy, you will always fight yourself. But if you approach it as a guide, you will find unseen laws, inner harmony, and the freedom to simply be. The silent patterns within. Silent patterns, the invisible rhythms that whisper beneath the noise of life. They live in your breath during stillness, in the gaze that sees through emotion, in the footsteps that wander into mystery. Every time you choose to engage your auxiliary function, you are decoding your silent pattern. When you choose logic and compassion, you awaken your neglected phi. When you live in the now but pause to dream, you activate ni or ni. When you turn toward your shadow, you unlock the path out of the labyrinth of the psyche. This is when you become fully alive. This journey is not just yours. Individuation isn't just personal growth. It is the path of standing rooted in a chaotic world, strong, unshaken, yet open. And with every silent step you take, you realize you are not alone. Your stillness echoes with the voices of many who've trembled before the dark and found light not despite it, but within it. Practice, write the soul back into wholeness. Choose one silent pattern that calls to you, a function you've neglected, or a shadow you're ready to listen to. Keep a 5-day journal, just 10 minutes a day. Let yourself think differently, feel differently, see differently. Not to change who you are, but to remember. Because as Jung said, behind every wall we build lies a door back to ourselves. Reflection, invitation. Have you seen a part of yourself reflected in these silent patterns? Are you balancing your dominant function with one you've long ignored? Have you ever felt reborn simply by facing your truth? Share a comment or whisper a truth you've always kept hidden, because maybe, just maybe, that truth is the first step toward coming home to yourself. If you felt light in the darkness, if these silent patterns are calling your name, subscribe. Together we'll go deeper into Jungian psychology archetypes, shadow work, anima, or animus, not just as ideas, but as soulful experience. We won't just read the story of the soul, we'll live it.